Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production. Today, we have packed the bass drum tight with blankets, we have used half a roll of gaff tape and all the Kleenex in the house. We are going for very muffled sounds today. And as it turns out, they sound super rad too. We are discussing inspiration, forcing limitations on ourselves, trying to find new sounds, and turning the drum set into something completely different than it was when we started. Sometimes hearing a sound and then seeing how a drummer generated that sound can give you a lot of cognitive dissonance. You might hear the sound and go, that sounds fantastic, and then see their setup and go, wow, that's a lot of tape and pillows, and that feels like way too much muffling for me. This is exactly what we want to talk about today, whatever it takes to get the sound that you're after. Sometimes we're looking for a specific sound and we make choices and modifications to the kit in order to generate that certain sound. Other times, we modify the kit first and then see what kind of inspiration the sounds we have in front of us gives us. This led us to where we are today, a very dead bass drum, a lot of tape, a lot of Kleenex, facial tissue, whatever you want to call it, and severely detuned drums, including in particular the snare drum. Let's hear each of these drums on their own. None of the sounds you're hearing today are going to have any kind of post-processing on them at all, but if you'd like to hear some of these put into a mix and played with a little bit, follow the link below to the Patreon. It's the best way to help us continue to do the show here, and there's going to be a lot of extended demos over there. We have a lot of fun checking out social media and seeing what drummers we love, and also drummers we've never heard of or seen before, do to get the sounds that they're looking for in the studio, to be creative, or even when they're just practicing. There's a tremendous amount of muffling going on in a lot of modern drum sounds, at least to our ears, in an effect to get something closer to electronic or synthetic or heavily affected sounds in an acoustic instrument. This is a great time to talk about the fact that it still holds true. Every sound is valid provided that it's the sound that you're looking for. That means that if we hear a sound coming out of a drum machine that might just be white noise or a sine wave or something like that, if that's valid coming out of a drum machine, there's no reason why we can't pursue that on a drum set. Particularly with the snare drum today, we're going after almost no tone, really. We want white noise, crunchiness, almost an overdriven sound. Similarly with the toms, minimal crosstalk, not a lot of sustain, punchy round attack, kind of sounds like hitting a tom button on a drum machine. The best part of what we did today is that none of it was destructive. We didn't change any of the heads, damage anything. In a matter of seconds, we can be back where we started and go off in another direction. In talking about modifying the behavior of the drums, and in the case of today, heavy-duty muffling, this affects the feel, the dynamic response, the chokiness, and also what you might choose to play on them based on how crazy they feel compared to wide-open drums that are tuned a little higher. This means for us that we have to interact with rebound differently because they're not giving us a lot back. We also have to interact with dynamics differently because, as we found when we started recording, the toms were speaking really loud, and the snare not so much, so I had to change the way that I attacked everything. Additionally, the bass drum being so severely muffled, it has very similar character at low volumes and higher volumes, so I can use the whole dynamic range, but the character doesn't really change, which is a really different experience. This means for me that it sends me off in a totally different direction. In some of the demos, I wanted to play with the back of the stick in my left hand and hit really hard in the center of the drum. In other cases, I wanted to tighten up the wires really tight and get a gated kind of sound to eliminate some crosstalk from the toms to the snare. There were even a couple of demos where, unbeknownst to me, the wires had loosened significantly, giving a really crazy response, but still valid because it made me happy. For anybody watching who is alarmed by the wildness in the snare drum when we're playing the rest of the kit or even the snare itself, bear in mind that if this were a recording situation with post-production and all of that, there would be gating going on, there would be EQing and other things like that to mitigate those sorts of sounds. But you can also just tighten the wires up and it will change the response, and you might run into some chokiness at lower dynamics, but that's the fun of all of this, is playing into it, adjusting things, seeing what works, and then getting inspiration from that. When it comes to over-tightening the wires, the best part of that sound is when you hit it pretty hard anyway, so if we're going in that direction, we don't really need to be concerned about full dynamic response anyway. There's also one hidden muffling thing here that you may or may not have noticed or heard. We have a bandana inside the hi-hat cymbals as a way to do a similar thing to them, which changes the feel, changes the response, changes the frequency, how it presents, and fits into the rest of the kit a little bit better than if they were wide open as well. Oftentimes when I'm working with drums and a lot of muffling, it's because I want to have a great sound at a lower dynamic. Everything we've done so far has been, on the medium to hard-hitting side, relatively, not super crazy, but let's see what happens when we raise all of the gains up on these drums and play them much quieter to draw the tone out. This is a totally different approach, but what it affords us is being able to, again, turn everything up a little bit. All the attacks are lowered down, and we can gather more of the resonance and tone out of the drums into the microphones, which is one of the fun things about this kind of muffling. We've focused the fundamental note of all of the drums so beautifully that at this lower dynamic, with the overtones quelled a bit from the muffling, we get a really pure sound that we really can't get any other way out of acoustic drums with single-ply heads like this. This is super fun for singer-songwriter situations. It's super fun for ambient recording, stuff like that. It can also just be super fun for any time where you don't want to have so much stuff jumping around and you want to feel a nice resonance off the drums playing at a lower dynamic. By approaching the drums in this manner at this lower volume and bringing up the volume on the recording equipment instead, this allows our articulation and clarity to really be on display. It will also show us anything in our articulation and clarity that isn't perfect, which doubles down as an opportunity to practice and work on that, and also an opportunity to see what's down there if we're normally hitting harder and leaning into wide open drums. Every single one of these things can be not just one, but many learning experiences, and that is definitely what keeps us coming back to the plate here, just to see what's in these drums that, again, Ben and I play every day. There's always something new in there. Little public service message to put in if you're going to be doing things like this. You may see that the way that I taped the Kleenex to each of these drums looks a little bit different. It has to do with wanting it to be able to move a little bit when I strike the drum, but not make any extra noise. So the floor tom needed the least bit of help, the snare needed the most, and I put a little bit of extra across them on the rack tom. So whether you're playing acoustically or whether you're recording or whatever it might be, listen closely for any rattles or any flapping or anything like that that you might hear when you're hitting them. And unless you want to hear that, I mean, that's okay too. In terms of the bass drum, it has been brought to my attention that it's not a blanket in there. It's two pretty large pillows. Thank you, Ben, for correcting me. And they were not placed strategically in any way. They were put in the drum. We threw a mic up and hit it. We liked the sound, so we left it that way. Pretty good way to go. Don't stress out about it too much. Put it in there, hit it, see what it sounds like. If you need to move it, worry about it then. One of the beautiful things about this, too, that we've said in the past and bears repeating, is that experimenting with whatever drums you have, whether they were $100, $10, $10,000, it's all valid. It doesn't matter what they are. It matters what you want to do with them, and ultimately whether or not you can get what you're looking for. And 9 times out of 10, no matter if it's an entry-level kit or a fancy kit, with a little experimentation and knowing what I'm looking for, I can get it, and you can too. As we mentioned before, if you like what you're seeing today, please follow the link below to the Patreon. That's the best way to help us continue to make these episodes. There will be extensive content from today's episode, as well as content from previous ones, and the Cymbal series, still going strong. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and tell us your stories about getting inspired by things you did to your drum set, whether it was to get a sound, a feel, whatever.